Okay, it's recording. My name is Sam Turpin. I'm a musician, artist, rapper, music producer, film producer, and yeah, I'm just myself.
Yeah.
That's me.
A lot of titles. I
Yeah.
know. I know you also have worked extensively as a model at one point.
I don't know about extensively. I have modeled before.
Yeah.
I like fashion. Shout out fashion industry. I'm not so involved there, but yeah, I've modeled before.
Yeah. How did that come about?
To be honest, you just get asked at one point. Fortunate to have a couple friends who are designers, so at one stage or another. Actually, the first model job I have was when Dip Street was still in Braamfontein. Shout out to Sir from Dip Street, and he was just like, "We have this new collection. We want some Insta posts, so come through and model." So I went there with Illa also was there from the band. So we did some gigs, and then we have other friends who are in fashion or are designers or are photographers, and they're like, "Hey, I'm doing this project. Will you come model?" So, but I've never had a contract for modeling. Got offered one, but
Yeah.
didn't work out.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know about extensively, but yeah.
How much has like existing in that space influenced the space, or has it had?
Look, I'm not gonna lie and say they're not connected. They are. We once did a show for Ray-Bans, for example, for Adidas. So they do meet, but I wouldn't say. I mean, fashion in and of itself is inspiring, but it is a different world from music. The fashion industry is its own thing. The music industry is its own thing. Like I said, they do meet, and it can be beautiful when they meet.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've always said this: if you're in music and you're a musical artist, you should be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
If you like fashion and you want to express yourself, then 100% do that too. If you want to put it in your videos and photos, but I think that whatever your main passion is should always be what drives you, and then when other things come along, try and make it beautiful.
Yeah.
So hopefully more of those beautiful collaborations happen between music and fashion.
I've noticed there's a very fashion kind of influence and aesthetic in a lot of your music videos.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the thing is, and I think it's quite particular to the African continent, is that many people use fashion as their language, their visual language, as their mode of expression.
Yeah.
So I think it can be an effective tool to send messages. So I think that's more where I have wanted to approach it from. It's some people approach fashion just to be flashy, or just that's not really where I'm coming from with it. So if you've noticed it, that's cool, because I don't really try to make it that deliberate. Yeah, it's just more like it's another language. You know, film is language, fashion is language, music is language. So as long as you can utilize a way to speak visually, then if it complements the music and vice versa.
Yeah. Speaking of music, I noticed you making some.
Yeah,
right
just
now.
messing with some ideas.
Can you walk us through what your process is like usually?
It's never uniform, so I don't have a singular process. But what you've just seen me do now, for example, is just create a drum pattern. So that's this.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll start like that, but at other times I might have I might start maybe with a bass line and get something cool. So I might record that first and then do the drums after, or another instrument. It depends what my idea is. So, okay, this is my process. Usually when I get an idea, whatever it is in my head, I try and get it down in some form or another and then build on top of that. But I don't choose when that happens. It's like I said, it's not a uniform process. So I don't have in my calendar, right, Monday, 9 a.m., make music. It's not like that at all.
Oh, okay.
It can happen whenever.
So like 3 o'clock in the morning.
It's happened at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up. I have to, because you're going to tell yourself you'll remember, but you won't remember.
Yeah.
You have to put it down somehow. I was on an airplane once, and I got this idea, and I had to like disturb the people who were sleeping next to me to get up and go into the toilet, and I just pulled my phone out and I recorded on my voice app, and then when I landed, I just went straight to where I was staying, and I just had to do the idea, and it became a song. So that's how it happens. You can be anywhere and anytime. That's how the creativity strikes.
And what's the difference in process? So like you make your own music, but you also are part of like a couple of groups.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So what is the difference in process you've noticed there?
Sort of. I don't know. It depends. It kind of happens by itself. It depends what I have to say. So if I have to say something and the way I'm going to say it happens through what would be a very Sam Turpin-esque expression, it's going to be then something I do by myself. If it's something I feel like could complement what we all do in, for example, the Charles Jean Suite group, I'll bring the idea, and then everyone else elaborates on it because I know that that's how it had to go. Similarly, the other group called Chinese Food, that's always been a very personality-based endeavor, based on, again, how I'm saying certain things. So if I get the expression to say something like that, then I'll call Ella up and be like, yo, I have an idea for called Chinese Food. So it depends where the message is coming from and how it has to be said, because the suite has different capabilities. Me personally, the way I express sometimes doesn't gel with how someone else would do it, and then I just have to do it myself. But I always have a policy that I won't put something out unless it's better than what I did before, at least in my own assessment. So it depends. But like, you know, if the suite come to me and say, hey, we're doing a project and we want just everyone's own individual thing, so bring us something that's just yours and then we're just going to include it, that can happen too. It's a very, that's why I say it depends, but it's a very open process, and it depends on the message that needs to be sent out.
Interesting. And because I have noticed there is a bit of a difference between what you do with like the Charles Jean Suite versus your own stuff. Your own stuff has a very like unique like audio aesthetic. How did you come across that? What kind of influences helped you build that?
That's a tricky question. I don't draw on influences for that. It's to me, when that happens, it's because that's how it sounded inside me, and I just have to get it out. And I mean, sometimes I've sat on the songs for years because it's not sounding, I can't get it to sound how it is inside. So then I won't release it. And other times it's happened almost immediately, where what I thought was the demo is perfect to me because that's how it was anyway, and then I put that out. Very unconventional, so I take that, but it's not. It's just whatever something is already like in me. That's how I have to send it out. And you know, that's difficult because whatever's inside a person might not be what the world wants or is expecting, or so you have to contend with that. But I think then that's the price. You know, you have to be true to yourself, and I think most artists can understand what I'm saying.
And then with regards to what you've been doing here, can you like just take us through how this is coming about and shaping up in your head? Is there an idea that you started with, or is there?
No, I just was like, okay, what am I doing here? How do I want these to sound? So I can take you through. I have in the drums here, let me just pull it up, a hi-hat pattern, which is literally just this here. Very standard, but you know, it's something to go off of. Then you want to turn it into a beat, you add the heartbeat, and then you want to turn it into a groove, you add the claps, and now you have a rhythm going. And look, again, I'm not really, I don't have a goal with this, I'm just showing you what I do. But when you have something like that, you know, and then if you say to somebody rap, you know, and you put that on, there's a beat they can rap to. So you do meet certain standards in terms of the culture, because you can't be too expressive that you start to isolate an audience or a crowd, because you want to share your art and your work. So there has to be a language that other people understand. So yeah, once, for example, once you have drums, you can then start doing other things. This is a Rhodes sound. Sorry, 1 second. Very well known jazz sound. So you could do chords, like for example, and then just loop that, and now you've got a somewhat of a beat. Maybe you add a bass line because people like that very like low. They want it to buzz through the speakers or whatever. And I don't know, then for example, what I'm doing, so this is what I would call a hip-hop way to compose music. I'm thinking of all these things because of my experience in hip-hop. But there are other ways to do it. Sometimes I write down notes and then I play it later, or maybe I'm not thinking about hip-hop, I'm thinking of a film, how I would score it, and then I go that way, and now I'm just playing synthesizers and trying to sequence that for hours on end. Like I said, it always depends on what I'm trying to do. But yeah, this, for example, is how I would throw together. You know, if somebody said make a beat in 5 minutes, I would probably do something like this.
So then, because I do notice you do draw from a lot of jazz, like musical perspective, and then lyrically you straight up hip hop. How did that combination come for you?
Again, I wouldn't say it's deliberate, but jazz is specifically is one of those moments in history that has always been so great. And my
Yeah.
parents love jazz, and I always grew up with certain jazz music as my sonic background. Specifically, the likes of Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela, um, even some stuff in the US. There was a lot of Quincy Jones stuff. It was very popular when I was very small. So it's just always been around. So I think I got into music through hip hop, and as a culture, hip hop itself has always been very jazz influenced. So it's not really so much by choice. That's just more how I landed in music.
Yeah.
Jazz was there, hip hop was there, and it's given me tools, and I'll always be very grateful for that. But I can't really. I'm not the best singer in terms of vocal, being able to hit notes with my vocals. So I haven't sang much.
Yeah.
You might hear me sing once or twice here and there if you're lucky, but maybe that's something I can still work on, vocal training. I'm open to the idea. But luckily, so far, you don't need that in rap music. You just rap, and if people like it, you're good. So been rapping up until this point, gonna continue to rap. And then, I don't know, at some point you might hear me singing because I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Vocals, your vocal cords are another instrument, and I'm not shy of that. So,
And then with regards to, like, I see an assortment of tech you have here. You have a very old school Dilla MPC, and then you have a MacBook Pro. How do those, like, connect with each other?
Okay, this is my homie MoeLycaen. Shout out MoeLycaen from Charles Jean Suite. This is his MPC. He's always had this for as long as I've known him. That's how he made beats, and still that's how he make beats. We actually use this on stage sometimes. We trigger samples. It's a very classic machine. It does the job, and you don't fix what's not broken. So that's the idea behind that. That's why it's here. So again, shout out my boy Ella. He probably has a ton more to say on it than I do. But yeah, we work on laptops too because much as that's amazing, music is digital too. There are a lot more tools digitally that you can access. If you're lucky enough to have access to a computer or the internet or software or even tools like this that work with computers, then the world is at your fingertips if you know where to find sound. Depends where you're looking for sound. So I don't know, in the suite we've got years of an ecosystem happening here, and I mean, this isn't even my stuff. This is the group stuff. I've got my own stuff at home. Also some interesting, I call them libraries of sound. And we've never had a moment where we put everything in one place. I think that would be interesting. Because everything coming from somewhere has its own history, its own process, its own sound. So combining those, I don't know, to me, that's one way to find magic. So combining old school and new school, I mean, what's wrong with that? I don't see a reason not to.
You've spoken a bit about, like, the music samples that you use. Do you ever collect your own samples?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's part of the process.
What kind of places do you look for music?
Okay. Well, again, to me, and I know I keep saying this, but it's not that deliberate. If I come across something, if I'm browsing, if I'm even sometimes in nature, I hear a bird or a raindrop or something, or you ever be in the kitchen and you accidentally drop a utensil and you hear a sound and you're like, ooh, what's that? And you do it again and record it. I've done things like that before. Sometimes, us musicians, when we're bored, we might browse sample libraries, the legal ones, and come across something cool and we save it and go back and use it later. Sometimes you're listening to the music and that, you want to do an idea with it and you record some of it. That's not the most legal method in terms of copyright law. There's ways to clear samples. So again, it depends on what you come across and just daily life. You have to be open enough to let life inspire you to do samples.
Because I remember there was a time where you got into a bit of trouble because of sampling.
No, I never got into trouble. Let's clear the record. I don't know what you heard. I've never been in any trouble for sampling. What I said, and I don't know, there's one interview you might be referring to, was I want to avoid potential problems. So there was times I'd released music with samples on it. I took it down because I also reached a point, and being in the suite was a big development of that, where I was able to fully compose everything and not need samples, which wasn't the case in the beginning. When I started out in hip-hop, it was get a sample, put drums on it, rap, done deal, and you grow into a different way if you've been in music long enough, and if music talks back to you, so I found myself not needing samples anymore. And when I learned also, because I took a course in copyright law, you know, that I was like, okay, you know, I never got into trouble, but I don't want to get into trouble. So
Yeah.
I took some of the sample things down. Everything that's still up that has a sample on it, I cleared it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the ones that you took down that you didn't clear, did you like rework them so that you could
Nah, because
re-release?
they're also of a time in my life. It represents a time in my life, so I don't want to change it or
Oh.
rework it.
Okay.
They're still available in places where I don't make money.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. To me, that's just like it's evidence of what we done and what we used to do. Listen, there's nothing wrong with sampling. It's a talent in and of itself. It's a large part of hip hop. I've got no problems with sampling at all. In fact, now usually if someone samples something and it goes viral, it gets big enough, the original owner might approach you and say, you know, you're gonna use that because we're getting heard too,
Yeah.
and it gets cleared that way. In fact, I think mostly it gets cleared that way. People don't usually clear it first, even though you probably should.
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing against sampling. I've never been in trouble, but also don't intend to get in trouble. And if I do sample in the future, I'll make all efforts to clear the samples,
Yeah.
and everyone benefits.
Cool. And then speaking of like videos going viral, do you like dip into the TikTok culture type of? Are you trying to get your songs to go viral as well?
I don't intentionally do things to get viral.
Yeah.
And I'm not so into the TikTok world. I think it's its own special thing, and it's got its amazing aspects of it. There are people who've built whole careers from it, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've not used TikTok that much. I do have a profile, but I've not. Yeah, I don't move around in the world with TikTok on my mind.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point I might, but
I've noticed you're not very like social media focused, like with your work and getting your work out there.
I don't want it to ever be a bedrock or a benchmark of how I assess what I
Yeah.
do. It's an amazing tool. Social media has, like I said to you earlier, democratized the marketing space in a
Yeah.
sense. So artists who might not have that much power are able to use it to be accessible. And I
Yeah.
think that's very useful and special. And I've always tried to engage it that way in a professional sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can use social media to, you gotta push what you do. You gotta hustle because you gotta assert yourself if you're trying to send messages to people as an artist.
Yeah.
So, again, nothing wrong with social media. It might not be the most healthy of habits if you're scrolling all day. We all have to be careful of that.
Yeah.
I know that people put timers now on their phone. I've sort of never really needed a timer because when I'm using it, I'm trying to share what I do.
Yeah.
So once it's out there, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go back to life now.
Yeah.
And but other people, hey, I mean, it's like anything. Too much is not the best, but it can be useful.
Yeah. You were talking earlier when we were on the couch. You were talking about like your. I think we were talking about your process, and then you were talking about the regular studio day, and how like I know you started from a very young age. So I was actually wondering from then, how much has your process changed? Like you said, you used to rely heavy on samples. Going forward, how much has it extended? Because you've also spent a lot of time learning. Like you
Yes.
studied sound engineering. You went to like made an active effort to learn the business of like making music, and that more so than just making music itself.
Mm-hmm.
How much has that influenced your craft?
Yeah, so my process has changed a lot. Like I said, when I first started as quite a young teenager, it was, you know, drum, sample, rap, shoot a video, put it out, and then hustle like that. And
Yeah.
again, I love that I entered music that way. I have no problem with that. It's very underground. It's guerrilla. That's what hip hop is for. So I love that, you know. And there's something about that that also never leaves you. You know, I can always do that.
Yeah.
And that's what's very. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that hip hop gave me the avenue and the entrance that it did. But you know, when you were around a lot of musicians and this started to happen more, you start to see, you know what composition can be like from scratch without samples. You start to see the way people play instruments. People have relationships with their instruments. I mean, hip hop too. When you're playing on something like this or whatever, that is also a relationship.
Yeah.
But it's different when you now have to play that sound back on stage.
Yeah.
Now it's not just a button you hit once and that's that. Now you have to play the thing again with maybe a different instrument. You have to play the same thing. So I got thrust into this world of, I want to say, music in general, which hip hop was always my language and it always will be, but music is a lot broader. we don't confine ourselves to genres in my community, and whatever you want to express musically is how you will do it.
Yeah.
So being around those people, like the guys in the Charles Jean Suite, like people who've been my teachers in the past, it opened a new world that I was very keen on exploring. I didn't have a reason not to.
Yeah.
I think once you enter a world and you see how big it is, and you should go as far as you can, as long as you don't get lost in anything. So playing instruments on stage, I never thought I'd be doing that when I started. I never thought I'd play an instrument on stage. I thought, microphone, that's that. But I've played instruments on stage at festivals, and the fact that alone that I can say that is just mind-blowing to me. So I'm very grateful for everyone who's always opened their space to me, taught me things. And also, sometimes it takes a friend to say, look at it differently, or look at it this way, or put that down and pick this up, or not in a way of like trying to change you, but in a way of it's good to stay open-minded, and having people who encourage you to be open-minded is a blessing. It's very special. So now in that sense, I'm no longer afraid of a bass guitar. I'm no longer afraid of a keyboard. I'm no longer intimidated by having to rehearse a line or play the line on stage, or and make people happy like that. Now there's more doors. When I came, there was one door, and I love that door. But now there's a lot of doors. I can choose which one to open. So it's been for the better in that sense.
Yeah. And what difference have you noticed between like creating here and then performing on a stage?
Interesting. Well, when you create in a studio, you might have your audience in your mind. You might have the world in your mind. I want to send this there. But you don't know how exactly they're receiving it physically as people on this earth. When you're on stage and there are people in front of you, you can feel their reaction. And sometimes it energizes you. Sometimes it's a difficult one. We all have good days and bad days. You have to engage with them on that level. Some people say it's spiritual, some say it's energetic, some say it's musical, it's electrical. There is an energy exchange that doesn't happen the same way in studio. Studio might be more spiritual, especially if you're composing. That's a spiritual process, and you're engaging with a different kind of audience, one that's not right in front of you, but that you're speaking to nonetheless. So they're similar but different. On stage, you have to respond to the energy more immediately, more directly, and it does affect how you will be physically. I mean, we mess up on stage, it happens, but you can't like explore your mistake, because the rest of your band is going to be like, what are you doing? Are we going there with you? Are we not going there with you? Whereas in studio, you might have a mistake and spend 2 hours trying to see what that can do. You have maybe, I want to say, more freedom in studio. But and on stage you have to be integral. So I think that's the biggest difference.
And and then which do you prefer?
I love it all. I don't choose. If I can create, I'm happy. If I can share, I'm happy. To me, it's the same.
Cool. And then one of the things I wanted to ask you is, because even though you started at a young age, you've been like, your childhood has been exposed to the art scene. You grew up like in that space. You had a very interesting upbringing. I thought. How much does that influence?
Do you mean how has it influenced my life, or how does it influence what I do, like going forward?
Both.
It showed me a very beautiful world that I think maybe some people aren't able to see for one reason or another, and it showed me a world where artistic expression was encouraged. So I grew up with that as my foundation. It's a privilege that I never take for granted, because some people I don't know, I don't have all the words to describe a lot of other people, but for myself, it taught me not to be afraid, and I think that I want to try, if I can help someone else not be afraid, then that's what I want to do. But it also showed me tools. Some people might sing or be musical and not know how they can, send it into the world. So growing up exposed to the arts, it showed me what the tools were, where they were. Not to say I was given, because my family wasn't in music. It was different. I'm the first one in music. So I had to find my own way into music and find my own musical tools. But I knew it was a world that existed nonetheless, and I knew that art worlds exist with tools.
Yeah.
So I had that advantage. So it has helped a lot. And yeah, I can never dissuade someone from the art world because that makes no sense to me. It's wonderful, it's weird, it's beautiful, it's up and down. Sometimes it's capitalist, sometimes it's free, sometimes it's this and that. You gotta, and art moves with the times.
Yeah.
And so I was taught not to be afraid of that. Inadvertently, not directly. No one said, "Hey, don't be afraid," but like over time, you get the message. So yeah, and then being exposed to that, I think the main thing is it teaches one not to be afraid. So if you think you have a good idea or a good project and you want to work on it and elaborate on it and eventually share it with people, I'm not scared, because I know that world exists where people share art.
Yeah.
So that barrier of fear, I never really had. Yeah.
Interesting. And then you've also said that growing up with a mother in the art space and that has affected how you carry yourself in the space, especially with regards to existing around women in the space.
Mm-hmm.
How so did it influence it?
Man, well, you said it best. So having a mother in the art space, which was always the case for me, my default, what I know is a woman's presence.
Yeah.
My father wasn't in the arts, so what I know from the art is I want to say, is a woman taking charge. That was my first view of it.
Yeah.
So to me, that was never different or weird or wrong. To me, that was always normal. I've never questioned a woman's presence or looked at it from a different intention.
Yeah.
Because my mother was doing her thing, so I know that women artists are there to do their thing. And my mother was always conscious to tell me about her struggles that she's had sometimes with men, here and there, or in general what women go through, with men specifically. I mean, it's not always just with men, but we're not gonna shy away from the fact that men can be awful.
Yeah.
So I was always conscious and aware of that, and growing up, I was taught about behavior a lot, and respect, which I think is not common enough. It should be, but it's not. That's all I can say from my perspective. And you sometimes see things, especially because on the streets, man, you see things that are like awful or terrible.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see things. My mom always taught me that if you can, you should intervene. I've had to, sometimes you hear a word that someone around you is using and you got to say, why are you using that word? And they try and justify small things, but it's the small things that can affect bigger things. So I was always been able to pick up on things like that. If you can, if I've been able to protect people, then I've tried. If I haven't been able to, I haven't been able to. You can't save the world, I don't think. You can just do what's in front of you.
Yeah.
So from that, and I know that, again, as a man, there's a responsibility. You also notice, I think, a lot of boys who grow up into men notice that, well, I've noticed, maybe not everyone, that people respond to you differently once you reach a certain age.
Yeah.
There was a time little kids weren't really afraid of me, and then by the time you hit 22, 23, you notice that now you're this big scary man. And I don't know, maybe some guys don't notice that, but I did notice that, and I think people should notice those kinds of things, because not enough people do, and then certain behaviors become normalized or excused. And in music, it's bad. There's a lot of I want to say predatory men in this world, predatory people, actually. I don't know why we keep confining it to one or another gender, because I think most genders are responsible for what happens to an extent. I mean, there are women who can be predatory. I'm not saying there aren't, but again, I say specifically men because most of the perpetrators are men. It means there's a culture of masculinity that is not it doesn't create well-being enough. It should. I think that if you are masculine, let me put it this way, you do have a responsibility if you're able to protect others. And like I said, I got that from my mother. So I think that's where the influence came from. But I don't wake up specifically saying, I'm going to go out and protect people, and I'm going to stop this and that, and I'm going to protect the world. No, because you got to, like I said, do it when you can, if you can.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to feel safe and have a safe space, and if anyone ever feels uncomfortable, there should be a way that they can find safety.
Yeah.
And you know, it's unfortunate that in music, in my line of work as an artist in music, there are too many opportunities for people to be uncomfortable. So if I can work to change that, then I want to, because I grew up being aware that that exists.
Yeah.
Some people take it for granted, or they exploit their power, or I hope I never exploit my power.
Yeah. Interesting. Because your parents were involved in the struggle. So
Yes.
how much of that influenced this kind of mindset?
Okay, I don't want to shine my parents as freedom fighters per se.
Yeah.
They were involved in the struggle to an extent.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to glorify that. But it, again, the idea of an open-minded world. I was never discouraged from engaging with people who are different from me in any sense of the word different, whereas some kids are.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's religion, race, or how to behave, I was never discouraged based on difference.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, because then the world stays open. It's never closed to you.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy and grateful. And also growing up as a white South African, I was never pushed into this tiny world of white South Africa that is discouraged from what surrounds it. I always was in the wider world. And had to meet the world like that, and for that I'm grateful. I don't wish it was any other way, but you know, anybody who makes decisions to stand by their ideals has to pay some sort of cost or benefit. So again, I don't want to glorify it, because I don't know what my family went through to get us to that point.
Yeah.
You know, everything has a price. I don't know what it was. I'm not able to have certain conversations for one reason or another, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So
Yeah.
I'm happy that I landed where I landed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, being open to difference and to cultures that are different from you, you can be influenced by cultures.
Yeah.
Different cultures, different sounds, different people, languages, nationalities, cultures. And the world is so rich in that sense. So I grew up exposed to a very rich world. So, and I think it has inputted, you know, into music, because if you like music, you listen to music from any part of the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it influences in that sense, in that I might like a sound that I heard because I'm not closed off to the idea of listening to something that is different from where I come from.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that ending part, because I was like, I structured this badly. I'm going from something very deep to a very basic question: is what are you listening to right now?
Okay, wait, I don't want to snitch on myself. Let me think very carefully. You know, we all have our guilty pleasures. What am I listening to right now? I'm listening to a lot of Ghanaian hip-hop. There's some cool stuff happening in Ghana. So, and some artists getting very huge right now. I don't want to name drop anybody, because, hey, man, this is not their thing. You know, they've got their own things going on. Shout out them. But there's a lot of cool stuff happening out of Ghana. I'm listening to a lot of South African music, especially jazz, especially Afro soul, things that sort of reach me differently. I've been listening to a lot of, I'm gonna expose one of my guilty pleasures, Dido.
Yeah.
Dido's career was amazing. You know, 2003, 2004, that album, White Flag, Thank You, just touches you differently, and her voice is smooth and special. So I've been listening to Dido, but I always listen to a lot of different music. I'm always playing Fela Kuti. I'm always playing some desert blues from West Africa. So yeah, I'm always playing very many different things. A lot of sonic input. But yeah, I've had that Ghanaian hip hop on loop for a bit.
Nice. Any recommendations?
Yeah, okay, let me say, definitely check out Black Sheriff, definitely check out Kweku Flick, Yautog and his whole crew. They're doing some dope stuff. Shout out my boy Stilo, Yao P, who I have a song with, from Accra. So yeah, but Ghana especially, Nigeria has their Afro beats. It's beautiful. We have our Amapiano. Ghana has its own thing. They've always had high life. But their hip hop right now, I think, is very special. There's a lot of cool moments happening. Yeah. So don't be scared to check out something that's different from what you know.
Great. And then what advice do you have for anyone who's either trying to move into making music or just the music space in general?
Ooh, you gotta be prepared to really go for what you want and hustle. And it's not gonna be easy. There are a ton of things up against young artists starting out. So you have to have that. You have to try and find your tenaciousness to be able to go out and try and grab what you want. And I don't mean that in the sense of being selfish. I mean that in the sense of you have to have the ability to assert yourself as an artist with presence in a space, because you want to perform. You want to have a production where you're shooting your music video. You want to be able to sit in a room with people and create a song and not be told to leave. So all of that requires a courage that I had to find it at one point as a young man, and I think most artists should find, young girls and women too. Anybody who's trying to do art has to find that courage to assert themselves. It's not easy. It's hard. We live in a world that sort of discourages that, or tells you to be quiet or sit back or don't come out. So find the courage. If you have to have a lot of fortitude. So keep strong. Make sure you're healthy. Make sure you're mentally okay. Don't go down the wrong rabbit holes. Learn to recognize when something can be a trap, because there's a lot of scams and things like that. Once you have these skills, do what you do, be proud of what you do, stand on it, tell people, and don't be scared, you know, because the arts and music can be beautiful. So don't be scared to try and create beauty and share it with the world, because the world needs more beauty.
Thank you. I think I've accidentally asked all my questions. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Yeah, I don't know.